So a lot of people have trouble remembering Chinese characters fast, and that's understandable because they're so different from the Latin alphabet we're used to. So sometimes you're just going to review one vocabulary 3, 4, 5, 6 or even 7 times, but you just cannot get this word in your head. So in this video I'm going to talk about 7 tips, tricks and best practices to remember Chinese characters faster. So let's go and jump right in. Number 1. Learn the radicals. Learning the radicals is a little bit like learning the alphabet in Chinese. Understanding the background of the components of a word can give you way deeper understanding, and it also helps you remembering the word. So it all goes by the concept divide and conquer. For example, this character, Qi, which means riding a horse or riding a bicycle, looks pretty messy when you first encounter it without any Chinese background knowledge. But if you just take out your phone and you open Pleco and do some research, you will soon find out that this is just a combination of different components which together have a meaning. For example, we can discover the ke here. This is the same ke like Hui. That ke itself consists of the ding, which is a component, and the ko, which is a radical. On top of the ke, you can find a da, which means big. This is a really basic word, so you can just remember and combine them. So on the left side, we're just gonna add a ma, which means horse. So if you combine these words, it already makes a lot more sense. Oftentimes in Chinese, one part of the character describes the meaning and the other one describes how to pronounce it. So in this case, if we look on the right side, we can see the qi, which is the same qi as in qi guai, which means strange or weird. Since you pronounce the qi writing just the same way as you pronounce the qi in qi guai, it's the implicator for the pronunciation. On the left side, you can see the horse, which carries the meaning. I mean, riding a horse makes a lot of sense if you have the horse radical in there. So I'm not telling you that you gotta do a sino-historical analysis for all of the words you're gonna encounter, but it's definitely gonna break down the complexity of all the words you're gonna see if you take a look at the dictionary from time to time. I put a link in the description where you can find all the radicals and their meaning on one website. The second tip I can give you is learn the stroke order. That's obviously a no-brainer for every Laoshi teaching students Chinese. They're always going to make sure they learn the stroke order. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. First of all, nobody gonna be able to read what you write if you use the wrong stroke order, because oftentimes you can only identify it by the way you write it. And the same concept you have when you try to identify someone else's handwriting. They might write it super sloppy, but you still can see in which order they put the strokes, and thereby you can identify what the character is supposed to mean. But let's take a look at the memory side. Why is a stroke order important to remember Chinese characters? So the first reason is, when you try to remember a Chinese character without writing it, you're only gonna have the visual component of the memory. But when you're also trying to write it, you're gonna have the sensory component, which might increase the success of memorizing Chinese characters. So at some point after learning more and more characters, you're gonna see there's a lot of characters out there which look more or less the same, at least for us and in the first impression. But if you take a closer look, they have like small differences. And the stroke order plays a big role. Let's take, for example, the two characters Tian and Yao. If you take a closer look, you're gonna realize that Tian has 2 horizontal strokes, which are completely parallel, and they're all drawn from left to right. Yao, however, has the upper stroke, which is a little bit angled, and you're also gonna write it from right to left. So that makes a huge difference when writing this character. You're gonna find both of these components in so many Chinese words. So just don't get lazy and ignore the stroke order halfway. You're gonna thank yourself in the long run for doing the extra mile when learning Chinese characters. Number 3, use Anki. Anki is a digital flashcard software, so there's basically a lot of applications, but for remembering Chinese, I think it's very, very useful. So the spaced repetition algorithm of Anki is gonna make sure that all the cards are gonna show up exactly at the time when you're about to forget them. I already made a video about how to create Chinese Mandarin flashcards with Anki very, very fast, so you can check that out later. So whenever I had some new words in my textbook or I just wanted to remember them, I entered them in my Anki database. So I was making sure that I got a collection with all my knowledge at one space. So between 2018 and 2021, you could just see me for hours sitting on my desk reviewing vocabularies over and over and over again. And there's one important thing I did most of the time when learning new words, and it is writing. And that brings me to my fourth point, which is write a lot. So I know there's a lot of discussions out there about whether you should actually learn writing Chinese anymore, because nowadays there's so many other ways to communicate, and wouldn't it be enough to just speak and read Chinese? And yeah, there's definitely a point, but I don't expect you to be able to write entire essays in Chinese, but whenever you see a new word and you try to memorize it, it's really, really helpful to write anyway. It's just the way you remember it the fastest. So back then, when I had my exams and when I had my lectures in Chinese, I was literally using Anki more or less every day and wrote down lots and lots of Chinese characters on so many papers, and I still got them. They piled up to quite a lot after a while, but that's what it takes to actually remember Chinese. Nobody told you it's gonna be easy. In the beginning, everybody's super motivated because it's a couple of new words and they look super exciting and you're really exciting to remember them. But I think around the level of HSK3 at latest, you're gonna realize, oh my gosh, there's so much things in my head and I don't know how to structure this knowledge. So the only way to do that is actually to understand those words and use them regularly, and by writing them, you use them. So now that I talked about how to memorize Chinese characters, how to understand them, I'm now gonna bring this entire concept in a bigger picture. So at the point where you already learned to write a character, you should make sure that you can also use it. And using means using it in a context. So when you learn a verb, you should know how to use the verb. When you learn an adjective, you should know when to use the adjective. Try to understand them more and more. And the best way to do that is example sentences. You can enter example sentences in your flashcards, just write them down under the Chinese, or if you just see a word and you don't understand it, open Pleco or open Line Dictionary and go look for example sentences, try to find out how to use them. Very soon I'm gonna make another video about how you can actually find content that uses the characters you just learned so you can understand how they are used. So there's, for example, websites out there where you can read short stories that have a special Chinese level, for example, even something like HSK2 or HSK3, which is very basic level and gives you a safe environment to read without having too many words you don't understand, that are distracting, that are confusing. So that's a really, really good way to go. I put some of the links down in the description, but soon I'm gonna make another video about that. Be sure to check it out. Tip number 6, tape your room full of sticky notes. So all you're gonna need are sticky notes and a pen, and then you just go ahead and write whatever vocabulary you just learned. So yeah, I'm just gonna show you what I did in my first semester of learning Chinese. All right, let's see what we got here. We got a Pingzi, we got a Beizi, Zhuozi, Dianao, Men and Izi. We got a Chenghu, Inyue, we got Qiang, we got Diban, Erji, and here we got a Deng. So at least in your own apartment or in your own room, use those sticky notes and put them everywhere you can. I promise you, it's gonna help a lot. All right, for the last tip, for the last best practice, in my opinion, I just want to tell you that you should dare to think out of the box. Dare to think a little bit more widely. Just try to remember words in whatever way it works best for you. It can be a super ridiculous thing, any connection you get in your head. Whenever you see this character, just use it and try to build a story about it. So, for example, whenever I see the word peng, which means like to bump into each other, I mean, that just sounds like two people peng who jump into each other. So like I always remember the peng, or whatever. You see, you have the word ling dao, and you see the ling, you know, it's the same ling from color. So you just imagine like white collar manager being the leader, and the Dow is like whatever, the Dow Jones, which is the leading stock index. So just come up with any connections, maybe it helps you. So that's the only thing people are not gonna teach you in your Chinese lessons, that you think out of the box. Because if you try to just remember everything by the book, it's not gonna work in the long term. Alright guys, I hope you learned something. I'm sorry I had to improvise a little bit because some of my A-roll footage was super blurry, so I had to record lots of the video again. So this is maybe not the best quality, but I hope you guys still could take something from this video. Maybe any tips, any best practice that you can use in your everyday Chinese learning process. If you guys are interested in any more topics, just let me know in the comments. I'm gonna read it and I'm gonna be interested to see what kind of content you are interested in. Also check out my other stuff. I got a video on how to create Anki flashcards super fast and another one for the top 8 translation software I use every day in my life for learning Chinese. So check that out. If you're interested in any other content, let me know in the comments. Love to see you guys. Hope you had a good time. Bye bye.